Turn-based games, you either love them or you hate them. There's never much of an in-between when it comes to the genre. Whether people think they're just a dull, boring style of gameplay or that's the greatest style of gameplay ever created, there's never a direct answer. And maybe that's because there's an abundance of them. Not only do they come out of Japan, some are apparently coming out of France now. I don't even know what's going on anymore. To me, it's pretty clear. France is going to become the new epicenter of video games. In all seriousness, I find turn-based games to be an amazing vehicle for delivering a good story usually. Which says at a glance, there's just not a lot of meat and bones going on with the gameplay. Press a button, win the battle. But this, my friends, is only the viewpoint of someone who is an official turn-based games enjoyer. Like me, I will ride or die for any of them. Final Fantasy, love it. Dragon Quest, never played it. Persona, I like it in secret. Now with that list, you'd think I don't know anything about Western turn-based games as well. I mean, I don't. But what the hell even is a turn-based game anyway? Is it just that everything has to play like Pokemon? Well, of course not. It's never that easy. For me, it's anything that you have to wait your turn to do a move on. Yeah, I know, that's broad. You start expecting the DMV to give you experience just by sitting in line or something. Of course, it's deeper than that, especially when it comes to how many different ways you can slice it. Obviously, when people think of turn-based games, you think of games as, like I said, Pokemon. And maybe if you own a console outside of a Nintendo, Shin Megami Tensei Devil Survivor. Oh, damn it. It all really boils down to a couple things. Is the system of the game limiting your movement and actions to a format that forces you to think critically about your decisions and make responsible choices based off the time and information provided? It's even more complex than that somehow. There's been so many styles and ways that developers have got around the boring, old, basic RPG style of turn-based games. Even outside of the RPGs, we've seen games like Civilizations go forwards and backwards. Impressive. That's not even to mention offshoots of the genre like real-time strategy or grand strategy or deck builder strategy, which is like 90% of it now, open zone turn-based games like Xenoblade. Hell, they even got FPS games that are turn-based. To boil down this genre to some boring, bland idea that all of these games are just some sort of burger with no toppings is insane to me. Yes, food. I know I'm American. Do I have any actual points on why they're not? Well, of course I do. I'm a professional. To start, I'll talk about my favorite turn-based genre, the turn-based RPG. Everyone on this planet has played a turn-based RPG at some point in their life. Everyone knows what a Pokemon is, you know, even Honkai Star Rail. Pokemon at least is a JRPG in some way because it's made by a Japanese company. Honkai is a CRPG. It's made by a Chinese company. Pokemon is often critiqued as a game with little to no depth, but depth is actually something you have to look for. It's not just on the surface. I mean, it is a kid's game. Don't tell anyone that, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have layers to it. For starters, the starters. For people who know about the classic Pokemon challenge, the Nuzlocke, you know that there's more knowledge going in than just selecting a Pokemon. The first part of depth is the nature of the Pokemon, a random characteristic that determines some of the base stats of your Pokemon. Now, obviously, for someone who's just enjoying the game, you wouldn't care. But for those who have done the challenge runs before, you'd understand that these stats matter. If someone's doing a Kaizo Ironmon or something, they gotta know the nature of their Pokemon. Something as small as a characteristic can determine whether or not your Pokemon can even kill a Caterpie. It doesn't even end there in the slightest. The EV stat, yes, the effort value stat, is one of the major pieces of depth to the game. Going around with your Lucario or your Caterpie or whatever, and taking out a specific Pokemon can raise hidden EV values that increase your stats. There's no in-game telling of this either. The most basic elements of Pokemon's system anyway are just what elements interact with each other. Fire, water. A lot of games do this if it's got elements involved, but that's not even, you know, straightforward anymore. What beats a steel type? Fire. If lightning damages water because it's conductive, then why isn't it damaging steel, which is also conductive? It doesn't make any sense. Then you have the signature transformations that got it in, like the Mega Evolution, the Dynamax. They're all fetishes, but some of it is to just sell the cards. But I refuse to believe no one at Game Freak cares about the games. Not even to really mention the later Pokemon entries like Black or White and Platinum having, you know, a deeper story. I'm sure there was a story from the very beginning. All I know about is, you know, they're killing each other with Pokemon, and that's about it. Then you get into a deeper slice of the pie. To start off with a game that's at least adjacent in some way, Persona, sadly. How is it adjacent, you may ask? Kids using monsters to fight monsters. You don't look up the character's age. It's as simple as it gets. Persona and most JRPGs are story-first games. You could argue either way towards Pokemon as someone who's never cared about the story. If you don't play Persona for the story, you're probably a masochist. And it's coming from someone who enjoys Persona's combat a little bit. Persona as a game is simply about how many personas you can use. Your character, at least for the first 3, 4, 5th, and maybe the second and first, but nobody remembers those, has the ability to use any persona they want, while the rest of the cast cannot. They just have to use the one that awakens from themselves. Esoteric. Because of this, there's a lot of depth in your lineup when it comes to your persona. The fusions you do, the moves you want, whether you want your character to be doing some sort of damage or just being a super support of some kind. These things matter. If you take Persona 3, specifically Reload because it's the one I have on hand, people like Yukari are healers, Junpei is a pure DPS who becomes good like halfway through the game, and Aegis is a ranged mixture of that. Now, a lot of Persona is mainly about elements, just like Pokemon is, but both games have different systems that allow for more intricate play. But Pokemon and Persona are both basic forms of combat, to be honest. Pretty basic systems. There's not that much going on behind the scenes. The complexity in a game like Persona is completely found within the fusions. It's a little more complex in a game like Shin Megami Tensei or whatever rather than Persona, but it's still complex enough that it has a whole system. So where are the complex turn-based games? Where are the ones that are gonna make my mind spark? There's so many genres at play that you can find them anywhere you look. The classic text-based RPG. The complexity lies completely in your imagination. It's such a popular genre they even have whole apps for it now. Impressive. To be serious, a lot of Western RPGs get so complex I don't even know how you play them. You look at a game like Fallout 2 and the game starts as fast as it begins. How charming. Honestly, these older sorts of RPGs look threatening to someone who's never played them, but they're pretty straightforward. In Fallout 2's case, your mouse has 3 different settings, one for combat, one for moving, and one for interaction. Then you just have your skills, inventory, and combat mode. Easier than you think it would be, but it's still hard in terms of general difficulty and seeing whatever is actually on your screen. How is this considered text-based, you may ask? Look at the corner of the damn screen. Come on. But I've never been a big fan of most Western RPGs anyway. The turn-based ones are all just some sort of variation of Dungeons and Dragons, and otherwise it's tacticals and city builders all the way down. Did I mention I'm a liar? Games like Baldur's Gate and older turn-based RPGs like Fallout are closer to the JRPG style, but the turn-based combat in these games are pretty complex compared to the basic games like Pokemon, and being an involved adaptation of older games or maybe even text RPGs or maybe even tabletop games like Monopoly. Even if I don't care for the Dungeons and Dragons style, which I don't, Baldur's Gate has a unique approach to what makes combat fun, especially turn-based combat. There's a lot more than meets the eye. Even with Fallout 2, it's not even that simple. What in the hell am I even looking at? Sometimes I find it weird how much games like Fallout or Elder Scrolls evolved from the start, but no matter what has changed, the RPG element has always stuck around. Some are so RPG focused they forgot to even add a story. Now, some games like Baldur's Gate, I'm sure there's some people who enjoy the gameplay more than the story. Maybe even with Fallout, talking about 2, not 3. I mean, Baldur's Gate has good combat. There's a lot of thought you have to put into your decisions and put thought into your movement and what you end up fighting and whether you want to jump everywhere or just shove your teammates to the ground, stuff like that. Going against an enemy too strong probably just means you'll die or end up taking a battle you can't win and you'll miss half the attacks. Something about Western RPGs is just missing shit that is right in front of you. I just don't get it. And then you have games like Civilization. Who am I kidding? Comparing Civilization to Baldur's Gate is like comparing Mario to Wario. They're strange cousins of each other with a different coat of paint. That's enough of the West. I'm tired of being here. Let's get back to where things actually matter. Japan. Yes, Japan. I'm white. I'm going to Japan. There's an abundance of Japanese RPGs. I really wish there was an acronym for the genre. These games tend to stay around similar formulas with complex, simple changes like a in-game system for leveling or dating the characters or having hearts with the characters when you're dating them. But as I said before, there's also an abundance of genres. Let's start with a simple old turn-based style. Got your party members, got the enemies. Suikoden has all, Final Fantasy has some, Persona 3 has none. For really simple changes like games like Chrono Trigger had a timer, so you were rushed to make your decisions. Final Fantasy 7 added overdrives and materials to boost your stats. Simple changes. I mean, even Pokemon added Mega Evolutions at some point. But where are the complex changes? The ones that flip the genre on its head? Is this genre just about like adding one bar here, one bar there, adding like an enemy bar on the side? No, of course not. Okay, maybe just a little bit. For Final Fantasy, you have 10 and 13, which are completely different, but have small and big changes between them that add a deeper system. In 10, you can swap your party members out and you get older stuff like the overdrives and summons. You never take away things, you just keep adding them. But then you get the greatest invention of any game, any RPG, an innovation so great that no game has even come close to its spectacle and its wonder. It's a grid that you put spheres in. Final Fantasy X is my favorite game of all time. I mean, of course it is. I'm biased towards it. Of course I made this whole video just to talk about it a little bit. The sphere grid is beautiful. It's like a pizza. It's simple. It's so simple, but it's so beautiful. Unless you put the expert mode. You put spheres in it. You move around every time you level, but unlike any Final Fantasy before it, your party members are completely customizable. Also like a pizza. Want a magic take that you can heal? You can throw Yuna down Lulu's path. Want Auron to hit the targets? Toss him down Titus's path. Want Waka to hit the targets and do anything? You also have to throw him down Titus's path. Okay, maybe out loud it sounds pretty basic, but it's deeper than it looks. You have other titles that are closer to Final Fantasy than not, like Dragon Quest, which I'd say is different in story and aesthetics, but the basic style of combat overlaps a little bit. Obviously obviously because I'm white, I got brown hair and glasses, you know who I'm about to talk about next. You get the big three in terms of their turn-based RPGs: Mario, and Mario. I'm sure there's others, but these are the ones everyone knows about. Mario has 3 separate RPGs attached to him: Super Mario RPG, Mario and Luigi, and Paper Mario. These games are pretty similar. They're very Nintendo, they're cartoony, they're fun, you're probably gonna pay $70 for them. Super Mario RPG was a Squaresoft, not Enix, game developed for the SNES. If you're gonna get someone to do it, that's who you're gonna get. This and the other 3 are what I consider interactive turn-based games, just because you do more than just give commands for combat. Almost all of the more interesting or different approaches to what a turn-based game could be, they're just interactive. These interactive games are pretty much as the developers willing to do before they cram the damn game into a disc. Press a button, tap a button, dodge. Some are a little bit more unique, some are just Paper Mario. If you take an example like Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, one of the best Nintendo has to offer. You have timings on your attacks, timings on avoiding attack, and timings on your super moves. Not to mention having more interaction in the open world. The Nintendo charm. They're silly games. The interaction's mostly cartoony or just collecting items or hitting power blocks. I mean, it's Mario. And then you get games like Earthbound, which everyone knows about and everyone understands its importance now. As far as Earthbound's combat is concerned, it's nothing crazy. But the game itself has lived far past its own existence. It would be stupid not to mention it at least once. It's one of those games that is both aesthetically pleasing and interesting creatively. While being so popular, nobody played it until 10 to 20 years after it came out. Unless you're Japanese, then you probably played like Mother 1, 2, and 3. And if there's a 4th one, probably the 4th one. Now, you can't escape it. But here is where things get serious. And I mean really serious. I'm talking about needing degrees to understand what is going on. Games where only the people with the strongest wills and strongest minds will survive. Tactical turn-based games. The genre is so extremely broad. There's so many of them. There's too many to even count. So I'll just skip around, you know. Start with something simple. Fire Emblem. It's about as basic as you can go. Different colors matching against each other. But then there's the simple and classic style of just different weapons and class types. There's more Fire Emblem games than there is Fire Emblem characters in Smash. And for the most part, you'll get the same sort of style every single time. Got the battle grid, got the characters, you gotta make them kiss. Fire Emblem is also a story-first game like I mentioned with everything else. And for the majority of the ones I played, being the original for the Game Boy Advance has chapters and multiple storylines, multiple characters. The stories have gotten more advanced over time. Recent copies add that Persona open world interaction. You know what? I'm tired of mentioning Persona. It has Morrowind-style interactions. Get with that what you will. Same old combat though. If something's broke, you don't fix it. And what's better to complement Fire Emblem than Final Fantasy Tactics? Yes, I'm all the way back to Final Fantasy somehow. Talk about story-first games. Tactics is like doing war reenactments. The amount of pieces on your screen, the characters you have to move on this damn grid. There's really just a lot going on. There's no other word for it. But for some reason, they have birth signs on the enemy allies' nameplates. Everyone's a different class of some kind. Like the more common ones such as Dark Knight and Chemist. Usually Chemist makes weapons, but he's so bloodthirsty he's getting on the damn battlefield. The hell's going on in Evalis? The main thing that really catches me off guard is the grid, or well, just any kind of arena you fight on. If you compare it directly to a game like Fire Emblem for the Game Boy Advance, which is more recent and less advanced, it makes the Final Fantasy Tactics look like running Linux. But the graphics of the arena remind me of something. These are incredible games. There's a lot of them and there's a lot of different storylines. They've actually kind of gotten more and more to the point I don't know what is what, who is who, what's going on. I don't know what the hell anything is. Square has other tactical games like Tactics Ogre and Triangle Strategy, and at some point there was going to be a Triangle Strategy too. Sorry, that's gone. They had to make another Marvel game. I need something to ease the pain over that one. Oh god. Fallout Tactics? Well, maybe it's related to Final Fantasy Tactics. Wow. Evalis looks really different nowadays. Yeah, I suck at this game. I couldn't tell you what's going on. I died so fast I couldn't even figure out the controls. This game is just so weird. It could almost pass as an RTS of some kind, and that's because it basically is an RTS. But I was hoping it would have something a little bit more. Maybe it's because I'm stupid, or maybe I just want something a little bit more spicy. Just give me anything. What the fuck is that? I don't even know how to explain this sort of thing. This sort of weird mix between a tactical turn-based game and a Resident Evil game is it's just so niche and weird. I can only think of 2 games. That's because there only is 2 games. I guess it's alright. But some of the joy of an old clunky survival horror is that the tank controls make you feel like you're in danger. Well, that's the excuse they've always given, but these controls feel a little bit too good. I feel unstoppable. Then you have Vagrant Story. Controls don't feel good. Same console, same combat, different themes. One issue, just small. For some reason, the camera in Vagrant Story moves so fast, I feel like I'm in a particle generator. If I had to put this on the Square Enix bad control scales, it's going under Drakengard. I can appreciate Square wanting to make a turn-based game when Resident Evil already exists, and it's achieving what Parasite Eve wants to, and to be completely honest, the gameplay is actually kind of fun. You get a lot of key features of what a survival horror game can be. Ammo count, healing, bad camera angles. If you really think about it, pressing multiple buttons just to shoot a zombie might as well be turn-based anyway. And if you're going to talk about strategy, you got to talk about the war games. There's no other name for it. Games about real war, fake war, Halo war. These are games played by people. You don't ask whose side took on World War II. Most of these games are barely turn-based and fall into real-time strategy or grand strategy. It's a genre so important Tim Duncan was playing it on a plane. Real-time strategy is the basic evolution of games like Civilization or just any turn-based strategy game, mostly board games. Mostly because there's not really any turns, it's kind of just resource management that is fast-paced. The only RTS game I tried for this video is StarCraft. I'll just let you see how this went. I just don't get it. But they're not turn-based, as I said, just an evolution of original concepts. Attached to RTS genre is the grand strategy genre. Wow. I say they're attached because if you find one, you'll probably just find the other. Most of them are just historical simulators or futuristic war sims, but there actually is a turn-based strategy game that doesn't look like this or that, with games like Darkest Dungeon or Slay the Spire, or I guess, but its own kind of thing, as cards. Actually, weirdly enough, most of them involve cards. I guess we couldn't wiggle our way from the classics. So you got JRPG style turn-based games, Western tabletop turn-based games, both Japanese strategy titles like Fire Emblem and Western strategy games like Civilization. What else could there possibly be left? Well, now you have the games that tried to be a little different. You get some older ones, like I said, Vagrant Story, which uses Parasite Eve's combat. For more obscure games, you get Shadow Hearts, which is a little bit closer to games like Mario and Luigi. This whole thing becomes pretty common in modern style games like Claire Obscure Expedition 33, 1.5, 2.5, Xeno Rebirth Remix, XD Collection, and it's pretty much the most basic sort of change you can do. Jangle the keys and hope people keep playing. There's a lot of examples of unique systems though. One of the older standouts I found is Xenogears. Not obscure, but you should see its older brother. Talk about flipping a genre on its head. Both Xenogears and Xenoblade don't know what a normal turn-based game looks like. To think that one company could make so many different battling systems under one big franchise. I love you, Monolith Soft. To start with Xenogears, the gears. The game's main standout in the combat is the combo system, maybe the point system. It's really weird. I don't know how it works or how the arenas work. There's so much on your screen, man. You get some pretty basic turn-based systems like the timer for your attack and all that, but overall flashy animations. Now the thing that really caught my eye about this game is it's actually just really pretty. It's gorgeous. I mean, look at these graphics. Reminds me a lot of Final Fantasy Tactics. I guess my only real problem for the most part is this camera angle is just really weird. It's like a isometric bird view, like I'm playing black and white. Guess that's what the compass is for. Also, it moves fast as hell, just like Vagrant Story. Somebody, please, just tell them that the camera needs to go a little bit slower. Then you have games like Shadow Hearts. As I said earlier, it's as interactive combat. Rather than having to do the timings yourself, it's a little bit closer to Final Fantasy X's overdrive system. You get this big ring, you hit the special spots of the ring, hit the orange, you hit normally, hit the red, it does special damage. You miss the ring entirely, you just get hit. But sometimes simple is all you need. I mean, if the goal is just to try to keep the player more engaged without needing 3 phones with a Billy reels, you have to at least something. As I mentioned earlier, games like Mario and Luigi both have timing for offense and defense. Final Fantasy VIII also had timing for the gunblade, and Shadowheart has its rings. They're all just trying to achieve something similar. Actually reminds me a lot of the Chrono Trigger timer. That was one of the first basic iterations of fundamental changes that just needed to move the needle a little bit. You couldn't just figure out what you wanted to do. The game forced you to think fast with a timer. These, of course, are all JRPGs. What else did you expect? I mean, look at me. There's a couple others that come to mind, like The World Ends With You. Not very turn-based. You'd think with this list there hasn't been a single game between Drakengard and Last of Us 2. Well, I guess you're at least a little bit kind of wrong. Game development is more accessible than ever. And with that, you get indie games, my specialty. So many, in fact, I only found 2. Undertale and Deltarune. Very different. These games can kind of be combined into 2 different combat systems. Now, everyone's played or at least seen Undertale, but that doesn't mean I want to spoil it, so spoiler warning. Undertale's combat is, of course, one of the most unique combat system that falls under the interactive turn-based. I've discussed it with the entire video. It becomes really specific or unique due to one thing. Killing things in the game is bad. For story reasons, you want to obtain the pacifist ending. Well, it's kind of optional, but experience is just your war crime stat. That's all it is. And for both Undertale and Deltarune, you have a genocide route. I actually prefer Deltarune's combat anyway. Newer game better, but to just have multiple party members is nice. For the most part, both games have very obvious similarities to Earthbound. Everyone knows that part. But for the one thing thing I hear nobody talk about is the relation to the Touhou series. What evidence do I have for this? Creator of the game likes Touhou. Lastly, in terms of unique systems, you have one of the oldest systems, card-based games, and I only also have at least one in mind. Solitaire for the MS-DOS. This is my speed. This is my kind of, Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. This game is aesthetically beautiful. I think a lot of Game Boy Advance games are. I guess I'm just biased towards pixel art, but it's barely a card game. It just has cards to attack. It's also not turn-based either. I guess I'm bad at this. I actually wanted to talk more about the level system and some sort of deeper ideas of what combat can be. It reminds me a lot of Slay the Spire. I mean, it doesn't actually, but where you have a large amount of control of your decks and you make a powerful deck, you can just win. I just think it's a creative method of making this weird mix between an interactive system and a turn-based game, which is, you know, it's what it's all about. Unique ideas in a digestible format that allows for player creativity and engagement. As I mentioned earlier with level systems like the Sphere Grid from Final Fantasy X, it pushed the players to actually try something new rather than being locked to what a specific idea of what your party member is and what they can be. Yuna is designed to be a healer, but if you really wanted to, you can turn her into Riku and make her into a thief. That sort of thing always pushes things forward. Something has willing to actually take the risk that changes the very core of what a video game can be. There's loads of examples of people who just wanted to play it safe. Games like Pokemon making micro changes or just a new form, but games like Deltarune push things to its real limits of what a game can be. And well, you may be asked, you gave me this big wall of information to just listen to a bunch of games, like, you know, just to prove that you play video games. Where the hell is the evolution? It's in the title. You see, this is where things get a little bit convoluted. If you want to go back all the way to the beginning, or at least early enough when it's pleasant to actually look at, we have multiple different approaches to a simple problem. How do I put story on a cartridge this small? Well, you sacrifice something. Usually the level of action and the gameplay, and sometimes the story too, but you know, there wasn't that much action going on back then. But either way, that mainly applies to the JRPG style of games, or just any RPG. In the West, there's this whole other thing going on. If you look at Fallout alone, it started as a PC game, but the people who made this Fallout and that Fallout just aren't even the same group of people. Somewhere along the lines get a little bit blurred and it becomes an FPS game with Fallout 3. And that seems to be the fate of most RPGs anyway. Start turn-based and action RPG. But not everything is that simple. With the Final Fantasy franchise alone, we saw the franchise go from whatever this mess is to having overdrives and summons, and even with Final Fantasy 8, we saw interactive gameplay. Now at 16 and 15, it's an action RPG. Between those two, you get Final Fantasy 7 Remake, which, you know, it's not that much better than 15. You just press one button, maybe two buttons. But then at 16, it just might as well be a slightly worse Devil May Cry game. It's not like it's a new idea for them, really. I mean, Final Fantasy 7 has two spin-offs that both feel awful to play in their own special way, which is kind of impressive. Crisis Core has a damn casino that just spins on your screen, and Dirge of Cerberus has worse controls than Drakengard. That's 3 times now. I can't really get over Kingdom Hearts 2 and Nier Replicant. Not the old one with the old man, but they still feel better to play. It's called a bias. It would be like if every Pokemon game after Colosseum and Gale of Darkness on the GameCube was just like this long-winded story-based game where you steal an opponent's Pokemon. Yes, I know only one of those applies, but still, even some pretty standard games like Pokemon at least make the graphics worse every year while making things cost more. If you want to look at a turn-based game that has the perfect combat, you can look at Xenoblade. From the first game, which came out all the way on the Wii, to the 3DS and then a playable port on the Switch, you get this really unique system that as the player, you actually feel like you have actual control of your party. With the Monado, you can buff or you can just not have Shulk at all. And then you can have the directional based attacks, which will remind me a lot of an MMO. And last but not least, color matching. Oh no. Sorry, I blacked out for a second. From the second game over to the third game, it added gacha and some other systems like elements matching rather than physical and defense attacks like the first one. Why does this even matter? Because things like this keep games fresh. They evolve over time. The genre hasn't stagnated at all. New ideas and new players are coming together and make interesting concepts of what a turn-based game can even be. Some games are just polishing their product and making it a little bit more accessible, but some companies are moving away from the style and moving over to the action RPG. For every single turn-based game that swaps to an MMO or action RPG, there will be hundreds of turn-based games that stay turn-based or just games that become turn-based. But it doesn't matter if every game is turn-based or not. The core idea that nothing has been done from point A to point B just angers me. I understand most gamers don't want to play games. They just play one game, Fortnite. To me, it is just unjustified to think this is boring. Maybe it's a little boring, but for the most of the time, the gameplay is barely even a surface of what the game actually is. You want to know why Deltarune has such good gameplay? It's split into the chapters short enough that you can actually develop it while not going insane from lack of sleep. There's a balancing act that has to be done between making a fulfilling fulfilling world and story and having gameplay that doesn't put you to sleep. It's one of the most difficult parts of balancing any game out. Too much gameplay, the story's gonna suffer. Too much story, people are gonna get bored. Imagine not playing an amazing story like Chrono Trigger just because you couldn't get around the fact that there isn't a speedrun timer on screen and you move at like 1,000,000 miles per hour. At least with how big games can get nowadays, hopefully we will get more games that have a perfect system like Xenoblade Chronicles while having a fulfilling story. Thank you, Monolith. Boomer rant over. Yes, I know, I'm in my early 20s. And with that, everyone who is a game developer, if you're watching, make clones of the sphere grid with Deltarune's combat and put a slot machine on screen somewhere. That's the whole point of this video. Goodbye.